my fellow Africans. Today, I stand before you with a revelation, a piece of news that will send shockwaves across the continent. A piece of news so unprecedented, so bold, and so calculated that it threatens to redefine the military balance of Africa as we know it. This is not speculation. This is not a rumor. This is a fact, confirmed by an insider deep within the corridors of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Together with the AES, the Alliance of Sahel States, is making moves that will redefine military alliances across the African continent. What you're about to hear has not yet surfaced in mainstream media. It is highly classified information, and it's only being revealed here exclusively by Media One Africa. This new coalition is plotting to recruit an army unlike any the African continent has ever witnessed. Not just any army. An army comprised of elite volunteers handpicked from 3 nations: Ghana, Namibia, and Kenya. Let that sink in for a moment. Why Ghana? Why Namibia? Why Kenya? These questions will haunt every analyst and every soldier across Africa for the next decade. According to the insider who spoke with Media One Africa, the AES leaders have identified these nations as rich breeding grounds for a new wave of highly trained, highly motivated troops. Troops that can operate across terrains, adapt to unconventional warfare, and most critically, remain loyal to the AES and Burkina Faso. And what about Nigeria? What about South Africa? The 2 African giants. According to this inside source, they're out. Not invited, not considered, not even approached for consultation. Let that sink in. The 2 largest economies on the African continent, Nigeria and South Africa, have been deliberately left out of the conversation. Not because they lack military might, no. Not because they lack equipment, resources, or skill, but because the AES doesn't trust them. This is not just a military recruitment drive. This is a statement about where the future of African security is headed. A statement about trust, about betrayal, about shifting alliances. The AES knows that Nigeria and South Africa carry significant political and economic weight within the African Union. Including them in this coalition would mean sharing sensitive strategies, compromising their plans. And in this new era, an era defined by suspicion, covert alliances, and rising tensions, the AES doesn't want to risk a leak. So what does this mean for the rest of us? What does it mean for Nigeria? What does it mean for South Africa? What does it mean for every nation in Africa that is not aligned with this new coalition? Let's break it down. Firstly, power dynamics will shift. An army comprised of elite volunteers from Ghana, Namibia, and Kenya gives the AES an unprecedented ability to operate across borders. This is about rapid response. This is about precision strikes. This is about creating an army that can move as one unit, regardless of the terrain, regardless of the crisis. Secondly, trust will be redefined. By excluding Nigeria and South Africa, the AES sends a message that traditional African powers can no longer be assumed to have a role in shaping the future of African security. Trust is being recalibrated, and the AES clearly doesn't consider Nigeria and South Africa trustworthy enough. Thirdly, a new balance of power will emerge. An army built from 3 nations working hand in hand with Burkina Faso reshapes alliances across the continent. Will Ghana, Namibia, and Kenya become the new centers of African military might? Will the traditional giants be relegated to the sidelines? Will this coalition attract other nations? Will smaller African nations now rally around the AES for protection and belonging? These questions haunt the corridors of power tonight. But make no mistake, this is a pivotal moment in African history. And this is not about ideology. This is not about traditional rivalries. This is about survival. The AES sees itself surrounded by threats, internal threats from terrorist groups, and external threats from nations and global powers that have long sought to control African resources and politics. To the AES, Ghana, Namibia, and Kenya represent reliability, discipline, and loyalty, characteristics that Nigeria and South Africa, for all their economic and military strength, have failed to project. Why? Because Nigeria grapples with internal security crises. Because South Africa grapples with political and economic turbulence. To the AES, these giants have become unpredictable, weakened by their internal struggles, and potentially susceptible to external manipulation. Think about this, my fellow Africans. An army built from volunteers across Ghana, Namibia, and Kenya will owe its allegiance not to Nigeria, not to South Africa, not to any traditional powerhouse, but to the AES and Burkina Faso. This army will be shaped by a new set of values, a new set of loyalties. It will operate beyond traditional borders, responding to threats as defined by its masters in Ouagadougou and the AES capitals. This is not just a shift in military alliances, this is a shift in the very balance of trust and cooperation within Africa. What does this mean for Nigeria? Will Abuja accept this slight? Will Nigeria rise to assert its role as a traditional powerhouse? Will it build its own coalition to counter the AES? Or will Nigeria watch from the sidelines as Burkina Faso and its AES allies carve a new path for the African continent? What about South Africa? Will Pretoria shrug off this exclusion? Or will it rally its southern neighbors to form an alternate coalition? Will this trigger an arms race across the continent? Will African nations now pick sides, aligning themselves with one coalition or another? We are entering a new era, an era where African nations must rethink their alliances, where old loyalties are called into question, where the very nature of sovereignty, trust, and cooperation is being reshaped before our eyes. My fellow Africans, this is a story that is still unfolding. The decisions made in Ouagadougou tonight will ripple across the continent for years, if not decades, to come. The AES and Burkina Faso have thrown down the gauntlet. Ghana, Namibia, and Kenya have been called to answer. Nigeria and South Africa have been left on the outside, looking in. My fellow Africans, as we close this chapter and step back to observe the bigger picture, one thing is clear. This is more than just a military recruitment drive. This is a pivotal moment, a shift in alliances, a shift in trust, and a shift in the very balance of power that has long defined our continent. What we're seeing with Burkina Faso and the AES is a bold statement. By choosing Ghana, Namibia, and Kenya as their core partners, they're reshaping the future of African security. And by excluding Nigeria and South Africa, they're making it plain that old alliances can no longer be taken for granted. This is a warning to every African state. Evolve, adapt, and assert your place, or risk being left behind. For Nigeria and South Africa, this is a moment for reflection. Will they rise to reclaim their role as pillars of African unity and strength? Will they build new coalitions and respond with their own bold strategies? Or will they watch as a new order takes shape, one that doesn't wait for their approval? For Ghana, Namibia, and Kenya, this is an opportunity. An opportunity to step into the spotlight, to redefine their role within the continent, and to demonstrate their strength and reliability as partners and leaders. The AES has thrown down the gauntlet, and these nations have picked it up. My brothers and sisters across the continent, what we're witnessing is the rewriting of African history. New alliances are being formed, new centers of power are rising, new voices are making themselves heard. The questions this leaves us with are profound. Where do we stand? Whose side are we on? And how do we secure the future we deserve for ourselves and generations to come? This is the moment to watch closely, to ask questions, and to demand accountability. Because one thing is certain, the Africa of tomorrow is being shaped today. The choices we make and the alliances we forge will determine if this continent truly becomes a beacon of strength, unity, and progress, or a land divided by suspicion and rivalry. Thank you for watching. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay engaged, because this is only the beginning. This is Media One Africa, reminding you that the future of Africa is in our hands.